record this session right now. Today's presenter is Bob Lavigna, Director of the Institute for Public Sector Employee Engagement. And the session is being recorded, and we will post the recording on our website at cpshr.us/recorded webinars. I've also put a link to where the recording will be in the chat. In order to ensure a high quality recording, all attendees are in listen only mode. And so if you have any questions for Bob, please put them in the chat panel. I'll do my best to coordinate those questions and ask Bob everyone's question at the end of his presentation. And we look forward to your participation. I know we have a couple of polls and different things, and we're excited to have Bob with us today. So with that, Bob, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks very much, Jason, and hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. Good afternoon. I'm in Madison, Wisconsin, so it's afternoon here, or good morning, depending upon where you are. And we have folks who have registered from all over the country, as well as abroad. So we're very excited about today's event. Before I get started, though, I want to say, first of all, most important, hope you and your loved ones are safe and healthy. Most important. I'm excited, as I always am, to talk about an issue that I think is critically important for most organizations, but maybe particularly the public sector, and that is employee engagement. And I'd like to start by saying that I believe the biggest challenge facing public sector organizations is attracting, developing, engaging, and retaining talent. Now, sometimes when I say that, I get some funny looks and raised eyebrows. And I know we have a lot of HR people who have registered, but I also know we have a lot of people who are not in HR. So in government, our ability to succeed depends almost entirely on our level of talent, having the right people with the right skills in the right places at the right times. And I know to our HR folks, I'm preaching to the choir, but for those of you who are not in HR, I think it's really important to understand that in the public sector, we can have great ideas, good policies, cutting edge technology, but if we don't have the talent to execute on those ideas and those policies and manage that technology, we can't succeed. And we think now more than ever that is true. And we'll talk a lot about what has occurred over the past 18 months and the implications of what we've experienced over that year and a half for the new working environment. Of course, COVID-19 has affected everyone, not just at work, but at home, drastically affected the workplace. You know, even before COVID-19, many employees were working remotely, at least part-time. Now, of course, millions more, including in government, have been working from home. And we hear a lot about the challenges with technology and communication, but there are also challenges around well-being, performance, productivity, and engagement. There's a quote that I really like. It's from an executive at an organization that had transitioned to a completely remote workforce before the coronavirus. And what this guy says is transitioning to working remotely is, quote, a process, not a binary switch to be flipped. But in many organizations, including in government, we did have to flip that switch sometimes overnight. And I know because we've done the research that many of your employees, especially in state and local government, are not able to work from home and have been reporting to their work sites for the past 18 months, risking their health to continue to deliver services to the people that your organizations serve. And we need to be grateful and recognize that. But there are also employees who have been working at home and want to continue to work from home. There's a lot of research out there showing that up to 85% of employees who have been working remotely for the first time want to continue working remotely. So when this crisis subsides, and of course we all hope that there is some light at the end of the tunnel, the workforce will have been transformed, not just a short-term response to a national emergency, but a permanent evolution in how many of us work and how we do our work. So we'll talk about that. I want to cover three things. Talk a little bit of background, what employee engagement is, so that we all understand that, and why it matters. What is the business case for why organizations should be focusing on measuring and improving employee engagement? Then we'll talk about what the new world of work is, what is this environment, and how to maximize engagement in the new world of work, because it's more important than ever to make sure that we create the environment for our employees to feel good about the work that they do and about the organization, to be engaged. And then we'll talk about what an engagement culture is, because that's really what we want to create. Whether an employee reports to their work site, continues to report to the work site, or can work remotely, engagement is part of the organization's DNA. And some of you may have heard me speak in the past. Some of the material will be familiar to you, but it's a different context this time. It's in the context of what we've experienced over the last 18 months in the world of work. A little bit about who we are, CPS HR Consulting. We're an independent and self-supporting government agency. So what we like to say is, just like the organizations that we work with, and we only work with other government agencies, we are also public servants. Our focus is in excellence in the public sector through HR solutions to improve organizational performance. Most of our clients are state and local government organizations. And a few years ago, we created a new business unit to focus specifically on helping public sector organizations measure and improve employee engagement as a way to deliver consistently high quality service to the people that government serves. So a little bit of background. What is employee engagement? If you have an extra week sometime, you can Google employee engagement and you can fight your way through all of the millions of hits that you'll get. But if you don't want to do that, here's the definition. It's really about creating the opportunity and the environment for our folks to have a strong connection between the work they do and the mission of the organization. Engaged employees are proud of what they do. They're proud of the organization. They think the organization values them. And in return, they're willing to deliver what is known as discretionary effort, which is just a researchy term that means they're going to do whatever it takes within reason to help the organization succeed. I did a session like this and someone said, when they think of employee engagement, they think of it as the opposite of employee burnout. So that's another way to think of it. How do we know if employees are engaged? Well, as you think about yourselves and the people you work with, you probably wouldn't be participating today unless you were engaged. I hope some of these behaviors will resonate with you. I'm not going to read them because you can read them, but there are two that I like to talk about. Engaged employees recommend their organization as a good place to work. They say good things about their organization. They explain to people all of the ways in which their government agency, organization, city, county helps people in their communities. And this has a couple of impacts. First of all, it pushes back on what is too often criticism of government, particularly by people who don't really appreciate all of the ways in which government positively affects their lives. And it also encourages others to consider public service careers. And as we talk about the new working environment, I think you realize how important it is that we do attract talented people to government. Of course, engaged people show up and they get things done, a little lower on the Maslow hierarchy as well. So here's from Dilbert. Boss says we need more of what the management experts call employee engagement. I know the details, something to do with you idiots working harder for the same pay. Dilbert says anything different on your end, and the boss says, I think I'm supposed to be happier. So as Dilbert often shows us, this is the way not to approach employee engagement. So I'm going to put you to work. I want to get a sense of where your organizations are with respect to employee engagement. So take a look at this question, poll question. Employee engagement is a priority in my organization. I'll let you decide what priority means. Strongly disagree, disagree, neither agree nor disagree, agree, or strongly agree. And Jason will summarize the results. We'll give you about a minute to respond to the question. It's actually A through E on the poll that you'll see, I think.
And the poll should be on everyone's screen. I see that answers are coming in fast and furious.
Good.
And when, yeah, about a minute, and I'll share the screen. We got about 70 people left answering.
Okay, we're getting near the last chance.
Yeah. 10-second warning. All right, here we go.
Okay, the answers are being computed as we
Yeah,
speak.
it's thinking.
A lot of data to go through.
Or there's a timer on my screen that says 1 second. Okay, full results. Let's see. Is it showing it there on your screen, Bob?
I see the bar. I don't see the percentages. The percentages shown. Oh, there we go. There we go. I see it now. Okay, so we'll go positive and negative. Strongly agree, 7%. Agree, 37%. So 44% agree. People in the middle, 15%. Disagree, 8%. Strongly disagree, 5%. So we've got a lot of a no answer, 28%. So for those of you who agree and say that it's a priority in your organization, I hope you will hear and see something today that will help you move even further down the road to improving engagement. Those of you who are in the disagree or middle section, I hope what you see and hear today will cause you to go back to your organizations and begin to have a conversation about why we should focus on employee engagement. So let's move on. Why does it matter? What's the business case for engagement? I'm going to show you in about 3 minutes. We'll go through about 30 years worth of research at a fairly high level in both the public and private sectors. And the idea here is not for you to memorize all these numbers, but to appreciate and understand that there is a strong body of research showing that measuring and improving employee engagement improves organizational performance. High engagement organizations outperform low engagement organizations in both the public and private sectors. So let's do a quick trip through the research. This is from the Gallup organization. Like our institute, Gallup has an engagement survey that it has administered to people around the world, primarily in the private sector. So what you see here is Gallup's analysis of some key performance indicators comparing organizations in the top 25% in terms of engagement and the bottom 25%. So the top 25% are more profitable, maybe not that relevant to us, but over 20% more productive, 10% higher customer scores. And look at the turnover bar. Low turnover organizations, typically in government, we are low turnover. 65% less turnover in high engagement organizations. So if you're beginning to wonder about and worry about turnover, whether it's retirement or people looking for other jobs, one of the solutions is to focus on engagement and make working where they are now as attractive as possible. It's from the Wall Street Journal about a year and a half ago. An article summarizing the results of research on 493 large, publicly traded, multinational organizations, billion-dollar companies. Research on performance of these 493 companies, and this is what the research found. Excuse me. The biggest jumps in this ranking of best managed businesses were in companies with big gains in employee engagement and development. The headline says it all. Not research and development, not marketing. Biggest gains were companies with the biggest gains in employee engagement and development. 493 large, publicly traded companies. So let's look at some government data. This is from our own national survey. We do regular national surveys, excuse me, at the Institute to understand the level of engagement across the country and what drives engagement. These are 3 statements that we include in our survey. I contribute to quality, cost savings, and customer service. And you can see that the fully engaged employees are up to twice as likely to agree with these statements. They contribute to quality, cost savings, and customer service than the not engaged. And don't we want our people to believe that they can affect outcomes like this? Another quick question. This is from our survey that we administer nationally and also to our clients. My organization is successful at achieving its mission. We break this down by level of government as well as the private sector. You can see, look at local government. Fully engaged employees, 3 times more likely, if my arithmetic is right, and I think it is, to agree with the statement, my organization is successful at achieving its mission, than the not engaged or somewhat engaged. And the relationships are across the board here. Much more likely fully engaged employees to believe their organization is achieving its mission. There's also a lot of research connecting the dots between how people feel at work and how they feel about their lives in general. You know, what happens to us at work? And certainly think about the last 18 months. What happens to us at work, whether we're reporting to our work sites or we're sitting in our den like I am today, affects how we feel about our life. Now, the scale's different here. It's 1 to 10. So the difference in the height of the bars isn't as dramatic as the previous chart. But these are still statistically significant differences. So in other words, fully engaged employees are much more satisfied with their lives in general than not engaged or somewhat engaged employees. These are statistically significant differences. And according to Gallup, the last 18 months, coronavirus has created a global mental health crisis. So we need to be concerned not only about how people are feeling at work, but how they're feeling about their lives in general. So we roll all of this up. I told you 30 years of research in about 3 minutes into this value chain. Improving engagement drives better performance. That leads to higher customer satisfaction. That leads to more trust in government. If the people who provide government services believe that the people they provide those services to trust them, they're also going to feel more engaged. So we refer to this as a virtuous cycle. Piece of research we did, I was vice president of research at the Partnership for Public Service. Part of my responsibility, that's a nonprofit, was producing the annual best places to work in the federal government ratings and rankings. We asked Gallup to do some research for us, telephone survey, because you know that's a lot of what Gallup does. Gallup asked the people who answered the phone, one of the questions was, think of your most recent interaction with someone in government and rate that interaction. Were you satisfied with the service that you got? Not if you got the answer you wanted. Were you satisfied with the level of service? When the folks who answered the phone said yes, they were satisfied with the level of service they received in that single interaction, they were also 3 times more likely to feel good about government overall. So as I like to say, think about that. Very empowering. That means that individual public servants can move the needle of public opinion about government 1 interaction at a time, as long as that's a positive interaction. As long as that public servant knows their stuff, is knowledgeable, provides good service, in other words, is engaged. So given all this research, you might think, well, there ought to be a lot of attention on engagement. Most organizations, employees should be fully engaged because the research is pretty clear. So we've done the research nationally. I'm going to share with you in a moment the results showing the level of engagement across the entire US economy, public and private sector. But before we do that, Jason's going to do another poll. We want to know what you think the percentage of public sector employees, federal, state, and local combined, are who are fully engaged. And you've got 10 categories ranging from 0 to 10%, all the way up to 91 to 100%. So you've got 10 choices instead of 5 this time. Jason's going to conduct a poll, and then we'll see what the results are.
Okay, 20 seconds. Get your answers in 20 seconds. A lot of responses. Thank you very much, everybody. And drum roll, please.
Okay, the tension builds as we wait for the results. Okay, can everyone see the results, Jason? They should be able to.
They should be able to, yeah.
Okay, so we have quite a distribution. The highest one being 31 to 40, 14%, followed by 51, 60, 13%. We've got 1% saying 0 to 10, and 0% saying 91 to 100. Okay, so pretty good results. The answer is, based on our national poll, representative sample of 2,000 employees in a variety of occupations in the private and public sector. So this is statistically significant stuff. We break it out by level of government, government overall, that's the one I asked you to respond to, and then the private sector. So 33% fully engaged. I think 14% of you said that, so you were right. That was the largest, that was a plurality. And it's pretty consistent across the board, at least with respect to fully engaged. So 33%, 1 out of 3 public sector employees, federal, state, and local, is engaged. We see this as a good news, bad news story. The bad news is we would certainly like that percentage of fully engaged, 1 out of 3, to be higher. We'd like the percentage of not engaged, 1 out of 4, to be lower. But the good news is this shows there is tremendous potential to improve government performance if we focus on improving employee engagement. So that's our glass is half full take on these numbers. And we've done this national survey 3 times, and these numbers have stayed pretty consistent. We're about to go out to the field for the 4th iteration. It'll be very interesting to see the extent to which the numbers have changed, if they have, since COVID-19. So just like anything you want to manage and you want to improve, you got to measure. Measurement isn't just for financial metrics. It's also about employee engagement. We need to understand what the level of engagement is, what the baseline is, what drives engagement, what's important to our employees before we can improve it. Otherwise, we're guessing. I wrote a book on this stuff, as Jason said, but I have another book here entitled 180 Ways to Improve Employee Engagement. I didn't write that one, although it's a good book. So there are a lot of ways to improve engagement, but good luck figuring out what's going to work unless you have some data. So there are indirect ways to evaluate engagement. If you have high turnover, low attendance, maybe you have an engagement problem. If performance evaluations are consistently high, maybe you don't have an engagement problem. Although we're not so great in the public sector about evaluating performance. You can do exit interviews, find out why people have left or are leaving, although that's sort of the ultimate lagging indicator. And you can do stay interviews. Sit down with people and have conversations. What is it that keeps you here? And those are all good data points. But we believe, and it's not just us saying this, that the best way to understand the level of engagement and what influences engagement is to ask our employees. Tell us, how do you feel about the organization? How do you feel about its mission? How do you feel about your role, your supervisor, leaders of the organization, resources, your teammates, pay and benefits, the culture, diversity, equity, and inclusion? Ask our employees to tell us how they feel about the organization and the workplace. Very interestingly, research done by the Center for State and Local Government Excellence, along with National Association of State Personnel Executives and the National Public Management Association for Human Resources, they do an annual survey, ask a sample of HR directors to respond to a series of questions. One of them is to identify key issues. So 77% of the respondents identified employee engagement as a key issue for their organization, but only 32% reported that they're surveying employees. So I like to think of this 45% gap, again, I think my arithmetic is right, as a data gap. The difference between those organizations that say engagement is important and those organizations that are trying to actually collect data from their employees to understand what the level of engagement is and what they need to do to improve it. And here's our roadmap. I'm not going to go through this in a lot of detail, but the important point I like to make is, I just said surveying employees is important because we need to understand directly from our employees what's going on. It's a very important step to collect data, but it is only one step in the process. We got to analyze the results, figure out what's important. Then, of course, the real value is in taking action and then sustaining engagement over the long term. We want employee engagement to be part of the organization's DNA. It's the way we interact with each other. It is the way we interact with the people that we serve. So the new world of work. Last 18 months, I mean, I've been in the world of work for a long time. It's the biggest disruption / change that I have ever experienced. I think, as I think about it, even more important or more significant than the advent of the computer. A new world of work. What does that mean, though? As I mentioned earlier, I think it's a permanent evolution in where and how we do work. For many of our employees, they don't want to go back full-time to their work sites. And I've talked to managers whose attitude is, well, when this thing is over, and we sort of thought it was already, everything's going to go back to normal. I want everybody back in the office doing what they were doing in the way they were doing it before COVID-19. Now, some employees are going to say, okay, but a lot of employees are not going to say, okay. So a permanent evolution, including for those people who must continue to report to their work sites. We have to give them the tools and support they need. There's an expectation for more flexibility. Survey done not by us, but by somebody else showed that 45% of employees are thinking about changing jobs in the next few months, and 70% would not work with an organization that didn't match their values. So one of the things that's happened in this country, and really internationally, over the last 18 months, is people have taken the opportunity to reconsider what they want out of work, what they want out of their lives, and how to merge the two. The Great Resignation, we've all heard about that, right? 9.5 million job vacancies, largest in history. Public sector employees, some offering hiring bonuses of up to $1,500, increased competition for talent. Waste management company, which competes head to head with some local governments, is now offering scholarships, college scholarships, not just to its employees, but to the family members of its employees. Talk about competing against that. More competition for talent based on employees' expectations. Of course, the flip side is, because of remote work, we can expand the search for talent. Certainly, I talk a lot about state government. I'm in Madison, Wisconsin. This is the state capital. We should, in state government here, no longer have to require people to work in Madison. We should be able to allow them to work wherever they want, at least across the state, and expand the search for talent. Demographic change. Census Bureau came out showing that the biggest growth population-wise across the country is people who designate as non-white. So a dramatic change in the demographic composition of this country, which means that inclusion, equity, and diversity isn't just a good thing to do. It's not just the right thing to do, even though it is a business necessity to make sure that we create and maintain diverse, equitable, and inclusive organizations. The demographic changes are inescapable. And then remote versus essential employees. We've done some research, which I'll share a little bit of it with you, showing that there is a gap in satisfaction between employees who are able to work remotely and employees designated as essential. I don't like designating certain employees as essential because we should all be designated as essential, but those employees to continue to report to work, their work sites, less satisfied, unhappy with their situations compared to their colleagues who are able to work remotely. And that is not going to go away. So it's really about a bifurcated workforce that we have to understand how to manage. This from Bloomberg, a little bit of overstatement, I think, particularly in the public sector, Americans are done with 5 days a week in the office. I think that's true of those folks in the public sector that have been able to work remotely. We did a survey last year to assess how public sector employees were feeling about the COVID-19 working environment and how their organizations were dealing with it. We got 20,000 responses from public sector employees across the country, and more than half were continuing to report to their work sites. So we were a little surprised. We shouldn't have been, because we know we work in a lot of cities, for example, and we know that probably majority of employees in city government are in public works, police, fire, emergency services, healthcare. These are people who can't phone it in. They can't video it in. They have to continue to report to their work sites. But for the rest of us, I think many of us are done with 5 days a week in the office, the so-called hybrid workforce. And here's a quote from somebody in government. If it's drastically changed, people have kids need to take an hour off to put someone down for a nap or to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So it's no longer report to work at 8 and leave at 4:45 and take an hour for lunch. It's just get your work done and get it done despite all of the other interruptions. We've had to drastically change. So this is interesting. Also, from this research that was done by the Center for State and Local Government Excellence, which actually calls itself something else, but if you go to if you Google Center for State and Local Government Excellence, you'll get this report based on a sample of HR directors in state and local governments. One of the questions was, when do you think retirement's going to take place? You know, we've been hearing in this country for, I don't know, 15 years about the retirement tsunami. This is pretty interesting. These are what the HR directors said. 52% next few years, 17% happening right now. So 69% are anticipating a wave of retirements beginning now over the next few years. And that's going to have a dramatic impact on the public sector workforce. And, you know, on average, we're older in the public sector than the private sector. And we don't have time to go into the reasons, but most of our people can also retire earlier. So it's kind of a double whammy. But this is also going to have a dramatic effect on the workplace. So I hope you and your organizations are taking a look at things like retirement eligibility and retirement trends and doing some workforce planning to respond. So I mentioned this comparison between essential employees, that is employees who continue to report to their work sites, and remote employees. We did this survey last year, got 20,000 responses. About half of them said they were continuing to report to their work sites, and half of them said they were working remotely. So we asked them the same question, and then we compared the results. And what we found is, across the board, employees continuing to report to their work sites are less satisfied. They were less satisfied with even being designated essential versus remote. They were less satisfied with the communication they're receiving from their leaders, from their supervisor, from their team members. They had less of an understanding of the policies in their organization around COVID-19. Think about that. People who are out there on the front lines risking their health were less satisfied with their understanding of their organization's specific COVID-19 policies. They had a higher workload than remote employees reported. Both categories had increased workloads, but essential employees' workloads had increased even more than employees working remotely. Let me go back for that for a moment. So across the board, these employees continuing to report to their work sites were less satisfied, and that isn't going to go away, particularly if we allow more flexibility around working remotely. We're going to have to pay attention to the employees on the front lines, make sure we understand their needs, we understand how they're feeling about their work and their working environment, and then meet their needs. So I've talked about what engagement is, why it matters, gave you 3 minutes on 30 years of research in public and private sectors, talk a little bit about this new world of work. And I know for many of you, you're you know this stuff because you're experiencing it every day on the front lines, but I hope some of what I've shared with you is helpful. Now we're going to talk about how organizations are taking steps to maximize engagement, to try to build and maintain engagement in this new world of work. But I want to say, before I get into the examples, there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution to improving employee engagement. I mentioned 180 ways to improve engagement. There are 90,000 public sector organizations in this country. We know there are 50 states in the District of Columbia, but 90,000 counties, cities, townships, special districts, etc. Each of which is probably, this is true, each is unique. Different budget situations, different cultures, different economic situations, different political situations. There isn't a one-size-fits-all solution to improving engagement. If someone tries to tell you that there is a one-size-fits-all solution, you should be very skeptical of that. But it is interesting to understand what organizations, what our research shows, have been working to improve engagement. And this is actually a quote from my book. Free pizza and Coke on a Friday afternoon is not an engagement strategy. A nice thing to do, but it's not an engagement strategy. Free pizza and wine on a Friday evening is also not an engagement strategy. So sometimes when I talk to organizations, talked to one a couple of weeks ago, they've had an engagement committee for a long time, finally getting around to surveying their employees, but that's another conversation. So I said, what has this committee been doing? And the answer was all about social activities, picnics, happy hours, remote happy hours. Their solution to engagement is to bring people together in social activities. And that is worthwhile. But that's not really what engagement is about. Engagement is about creating the opportunities, as we described earlier, for people to feel good about the work that they're doing and the organization where they do that work. So make it a strategy. Make engagement a strategy, not just an HR thing. And I don't mean that pejoratively because I'm in that business too. Not something we're going to do this month, this week, and then forget about it next week, next month, but a strategic imperative. And here's an example, King County, Washington, where Seattle is. This is a strategic plan goal. This isn't the HR strategic plan. This is the county's strategic plan. It wants to operate efficiently and effectively and be accountable. And how's it going to do that? By developing a highly engaged, I underline that, diverse, culture responsive, and high-performing workforce. So King County has said, engagement is important to us as a strategy because that is the way that we are going to deliver service and be accountable to the public. Make it a strategy. Be explicit and be visible. Provide leadership, strong and visible, regardless of whether people are working remotely or whether they're continuing to report to their work sites. We have found that leadership nationally is a key driver of engagement. And best places to work in the federal government, every year that rating and ranking, set of rating and rankings has been done, leadership has been the #1 driver of employee engagement across the entire federal agency. Leaders who are visible, leaders who exemplify and live and demonstrate the values of the organization, leaders who communicate effectively, leaders who manage change effectively. As I said earlier, my experience in the world of work, 45 years, I can't remember a single workplace change as significant as what we've experienced over the last 18 months. The ultimate in a change management challenge, strong and visible leadership. What else does that mean? It means put leaders into leadership positions who can build engagement, not because they've been around for a long time or they're good technically. Experience is important, but we believe they can build engagement. There's an example I cite in the book. It's actually from the United Kingdom, where when this organization is interviewing candidates for a leadership position, they give the candidates a set of employee engagement survey data, and they ask those candidates right on the spot, look at these results and tell us what you would do if you were the leader of the organization to act on the results. Develop competencies around engagement. Make sure people understand, people in leadership positions, what they need to be good at in order to build high engagement organizations. Give them what they need to build and maintain those organizations, and then hold them accountable for engagement. When we do a survey, we tell the organizations to drill down to the lowest possible organizational unit, because that's where the accountability is. That is where the action will be. There are private sector companies, don't quote me on this because I think it's a slippery slope, that actually link compensation for leaders to how engaged their workforces are. There's also one company, if you're in the succession pipeline and your organization has a consistently low level of engagement, you are no longer in that pipeline. There was research done in the federal government, again, about leadership, to try to figure out what differentiated high engagement from low engagement federal agencies. And it found that managing performance was one of the single biggest differentiator. What does that mean? It means that the managers and supervisors, the leaders in the high engagement organizations, agencies, did these things, I'm not going to read them, better and more often than managers and supervisors in low engagement organizations. Managing performance, not just HR stuff. It's about the relationship between the leader, the manager, the supervisor, and the frontline employee. Managing performance effectively. Supervising remote workers. You know, a lot of our managers and supervisors had to make a transition when many of their employees began to work remotely. You know, if I can't see you at your desk, how do I know you're actually performing? A lot of managers focus on time, activities, and attendance. And now they can't really do that as much. So it's important to focus on results and outcomes. We think that's a good idea in general, not just for employees who are working remotely, but it is a transition. We actually have to redesign jobs, not just to include the impact of technology, but also to focus less on activities and more on results and outcomes, and set expectations about work-life balance. I know that you're not able to work from 8 to 4:30 every day. I just need you to get work done. And I'm not going to be too worried about when you're doing it. Same thing with employees continue to report to their work site. Give them flexibility, whatever flexibility we can give them with respect to schedules and reporting and ending times to try to meet their needs. And make sure leaders model behavior. If a leader says, well, I'm going to allow employees to work remotely, is that leader going to work remotely, her or himself? Or are they going to send the message that I'm in the office, so it's really important for everyone to be in the office, regardless of what I say. So it's a little different skill set, and we need to give our leaders the tools to manage effectively. And here's one of them. This is a little worksheet we put together. Actually, Jason had a lot to do with this, just for a manager or supervisor to frame a conversation that you can have weekly. You know, what are we going to do this week? How are we going to measure success? What are we going to do about your growth and development? What didn't happen last week? Maybe we want to make sure we do better this week. On the right side, you can even do this daily, although that might be a little much. But just to kind of structure that conversation. Here's what one city of Henderson, Nevada, we've worked with them on a number of projects over multiple years. Some of the ways that the city of Henderson responded to COVID-19 to help leaders, managers, and supervisors, but also frontline employees deal with this new working environment. Wellness articles and information, articles to support remote work, as well as supervisors who are struggling to manage remotely, on-site wellness activities for those people who continue to report to their work sites, virtual counseling for everyone, even giving people the opportunity to do volunteer activities in paid status so they wouldn't have to lay them off, and so on. Just some examples of what one organization has done. Focus on training and development. You know, at the beginning of this thing, this COVID-19, the coronavirus, it might have been easy to neglect training and development as we all struggled just to get our work done. But that really would have been and continued to be a mistake. We need to have those conversations with our employees around their development to help them develop, but also to show them that we're trying to continue to do business as normal. And of course, the explosion of online resources, conferences, training. One of organizations we work with has delivered 2,000 online classes during the pandemic. Also succession planning. Showed you the data on retirement. We need right now, today, as we speak, to build the next generation of leaders. And we can do succession planning in government. May not be using the private sector model, but we can put in place systems, processes, and opportunities to develop the next generation of leaders. Mentoring. Mentoring doesn't require face-to-face interaction, doesn't cost a lot of money to create a mentoring program, and also new employee onboarding as a way to make sure that we can train and develop our new employees. And I talk about this a lot because I think it's so important. And it really is low-hanging fruit. You know, if you're looking for something that you can implement pretty quickly, new employee onboarding is one of the things that we believe is low-hanging fruit. You know, when I do these sessions, sometimes I get feedback that said, Bob, you know, I really wanted you to tell me what I can do tomorrow, or even today, this afternoon, back at my work site to improve engagement immediately. And I say, boy, I wish I knew the answer to that, because if I did, I'd be a very wealthy person, and I'm not. There isn't a one-size-fits-all solution, but new employee onboarding comes real close. So this is our model. I'm not going to go through it. I have some additional resources. If you want them, I'm happy to send them to you. Just send me an email. You'll see my email address at the end. By the way, if you want to connect with me via LinkedIn, I'd love to do that as well. Basically, what we're saying here is onboarding for a new employee is an integrated set of activities that begins when a new employee accepts a job offer. So before they even show up at work, and extends throughout that new employee's entire first year. We've divided into 5 phases. It could be 3, it could be 7, doesn't matter. And we've identified for this chart some of the activities, not all of them, some of the activities that should occur during each of these phases. Organizations that do a good job of onboarding new employees, in other words, making sure that when the new employee is ready for the job is ready for the new employee. Faster time to productivity, higher retention, and higher level of engagement. And most of these activities are not HR things. Some of them are, but a lot of it is about making sure the new employee has the opportunity to make a strong connection with their supervisor right from the start, whether that's in person or it's remotely. Quicken Loans, everybody knows Quicken Loans, right? They advertise like crazy. The CEO of Quicken Loans spends a full day with each new group of employees, each group of new employees, because he wants them to hear firsthand from him about the organization's culture. He calls them the isms, and he wants to explain those isms to new employees himself. So if the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar organization can devote a full day interacting and meeting with new employees, so can most organizations. You knew this was coming, right? Communicate, communicate, communicate. Even before COVID-19, surveys showed that communication, collaboration were among the biggest challenges of working remotely. Our survey last year, 20,000 responses about COVID-19, 1/4 of the respondents said they were not satisfied with communication. 30% of the folks designated as essential didn't know before they were designated as essential that they were going to be designated as essential. We also asked them to tell us which forms of communication are most effective. Email was identified as the most effective, but there are other forms, meetings, video, recordings, that they also identify. So it's not one size, it's really all of the above, including work policies. I mentioned that there was dissatisfaction among essential employees with their understanding of COVID-19 work policies. Think about that. People who are on the front lines risking their health said, many of them said they did not understand their COVID-19 work policies. Communicate. I'm going to give you an example from one of my other jobs. I was assistant vice chancellor and director of HR at the University of Wisconsin, we did 3 campus-wide employee engagement surveys. Our second and third shift employees, underappreciated, undervalued, told us they were not satisfied with their understanding of what was going on the campus. So we began to have HR forums. We do one in the daytime, and we would do one from 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. at night. We call them the midnight sessions for the second and third shift folks. Police officers, public works, people who took care of the laboratory animals, people who, for most employees, were invisible. It turned out that these midnight sessions, as we call them, I went to all of them, were better attended than the daytime sessions. These people were hungry, not only to hear about what was going on, but also to provide feedback. We got the chancellor, the CEO, to show up at one of these sessions. Someone in the audience said that was historic. It was the first time most of them had ever seen a chancellor in person. And they treated her like a rock star. They took selfies with her. It was very cute. But it demonstrated to us that we needed to meet our employees where they were, not expect them to meet us where we were. Communicate, communicate, communicate. Here's what one organization has done. Set of FAQs. You see the Qs here. They also provided the A's, the answers, continually updating to make sure that they're responding to the questions that their employees have about COVID-19. Here's another template that we developed. It's simply a way to think about and organize communication. When, to whom, what are we trying to communicate? How are we going to do it? Who's going to do it? And have we done it? So just like I said, a way to organize communication. Recognize and appreciate. We also find in our national work and in our work with individual government organizations that the statement, I feel valued as an employee, is often a statistically high influence of engagement, but also one of the lowest scoring questions. And you see here some of the other data from some other surveys about why employee recognition is so important. Particularly, I know I'm hitting this pretty hard, recognize employees who have either struggled at home to balance work and personal lives, or have risked their health and even their lives by continuing to report to their work sites and deliver essential services. Nowhere, at no time, in my memory, has it been more important to tell employees how much we appreciate everything that they have done. Here is from a supervisor's toolkit an organization gave to its supervisors. It included how to recognize employees without spending a dime. Now, this was pre-COVID, so maybe you can't put a post-it note of thanks on their desk or a thank you note on the department bulletin board. You may need to do that electronically, but I think these are still good ideas. These, as well as these, including simply asking employee for his or her opinion. That's another one of the questions in our survey. Do I have an opportunity to provide opinions on how work is done around here? It would be a very powerful thing to do, to reach out to employees. So recognition without spending a dime. What else? Focus on the mission and the work. There's a stream of research called public service motivation that has revealed that in government, our employees, public sector, have a stronger connection between the work that they do and the mission of the organization than employees in the private sector in general. That doesn't mean that private sector employees aren't connected to the mission of the organization, but it is more common and prominent in the public sector, and it's more important than ever. Our employees over the past year and a half have been providing even more essential services to the people in our states, our communities, and the stakeholders in federal agencies. So it's more important than ever to connect those dots. Highly engaged employees are 3 times more likely to believe that their organizations are achieving their mission. They need to take extra steps. One of our clients, a housing authority, has put together a series of success stories, videos, that it shares not only with its external stakeholders, but also with its employees, to show those employees you really are making a difference in the lives of the people we serve, the residents of the housing units that we manage. Focus on the mission and the work. Here's a great example from National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Story goes, a group of reporters were walking down the hallway at NASA headquarters, came upon a janitor, and they asked this guy, they said, "What is it you do here at NASA?" The guy famously said, "I help send men to the moon." At that time it was men. Wouldn't it be great if all of our employees had that same connection, regardless of who they are, where they are in the organization, between the work they do and the mission of the organization? Embrace flexibility. It's here to stay. Manager says, well, let's bring everybody back. We're going to go back to the way it was before COVID-19. That is not going to be a successful strategy to attract, develop, engage, and retain employees, and give people the tools they need to be successful, whether it's employees at their work sites or employee working remotely. I can't tell you how many times I've been on a Teams call or a Zoom call, and somebody says, well, I don't have enough bandwidth, or I don't have enough connectivity. If we expect people to work effectively remotely, we need to give them the tools they need to do that. And ask for feedback. Talked a lot about communicating to employees, but we also need employees to communicate back to us. That's why we did the survey last year, 20,000 responses from employees across the country. We were overwhelmed, stunned by the number of responses, but it showed us that employees want to tell their employers rather, how they are feeling about the COVID-19 workplace. So it can be an engagement survey like the one that we administer. We have added COVID-19 questions as options for our clients if they want to ask their employees directly about the COVID-19 working environments. We also recently added diversity, equity, and inclusion questions because that's such an important consideration. So whether you want to do a full-fledged engagement survey or you want to do a pulse survey to focus just on COVID-19, you need to ask our employees, we can't afford to guess what's working, what's not working, and how should we move forward. So the last thing I want to wrap up, engagement culture. Last but certainly not least, we're involved with a research consortium sponsored by the Conference Board when I was at the university, where we did research on what an engagement culture is. We defined it, increasing levels of engagement as a cultural norm. Then we surveyed and interviewed people in organizations at the top of all of these best places lists. Great places to work, private sector, best places to work in the federal government. Gallup has a list, great colleges to work for. And we asked them, how did you get to these top of these best places lists? And this is what we found. These are the characteristics of an engagement culture. Everybody gets the business case. They understand how engagement links to success. Leaders work together to drive it. It's not just an HR program. Right from the top, they regularly measure and analyze engagement and take action on the results. They try to hire, train, evaluate, advance, and even pay people based on their contribution to engagement culture. And there's a strong communication strategy, especially by leaders. One of the folks I spoke to at one of these companies, she said, Bob, when it comes to engagement, we talk about it all the time. Not something we do when the rest of our job is done, our work is done, not something at the bottom of a meeting agenda. If we get to it, we get to it. If we don't get to it, that's okay too. We talk about it all the time. Characteristics of an engagement culture. It's part of these organizations' DNA. So key takeaways. Engagement drives performance. Hope I've demonstrated that to you. World of work is changing dramatically. We need to measure engagement just like anything else that we want to improve, take action on the results. We need to tailor strategies to what we find out our employees say is important to them. And we want to create a culture of engagement. So thank you very much for your time and attention. As I said earlier, for those of you who are already doing something around engagement, I hope we discussed something today that'll help you move down the road to an engagement culture. Those of you who haven't really begun on that road, we hope you'll go back to your organizations and have a conversation. We're happy to interact with you, even if it's just have a phone conversation. You can email us, go to our website, happy to connect with you on LinkedIn. We are on a crusade at the Institute to improve the level of engagement in the public sector so that government can consistently deliver high-quality services to the people that government serves. Government, the most important, the largest, the most important employer in this country. So I know we're up at the 1 hour limit, but I'm happy to hang around for any questions. I'll turn it back to you, Jason.
Sure, we have a couple of questions that came in. I know, be mindful of everyone's time, so if you have to drop off, totally get it. And then for all the questions that have come in about the slides and the recording, they will be available online on our website. So if you go to cpshr.us, and then in the About section, there's a webinar there that you can see the recordings. You can also search the resource library for employee engagement. It'll show up. So, and I will try to send out the slides and the video recording to all of the attendees as well via email. But that being said, let's go to the few questions that were asked. So one question, Bob, was on the topic of remote versus essential gap. And how do essential employees kind of avoid the jealousy, misperceptions surrounding remote workers? The person said that most of these employees believe remote workers are not working as hard, and it's likely impacting their personal engagement. Do you have any suggestions there?
Yeah, you know, in our report, and again, send me an email and I'll send you the full report. We did make some recommendations, and it's really about, you know, I think it comes down oftentimes to paying attention to these folks. And I cite you the example when we had the midnight forums for our second and third shift folks. These were people who really did feel like they were second or third class citizens. And I know that some of our so-called essential employees feel the same way. You know, their colleagues are at home in their sweatpants and their shorts doing who knows what in front of their computers or not. It's a natural inclination. I think we need to provide leadership for these people, give them as much flexibility as we possibly can, whether it's scheduling or starting and ending times, taking time off, pay some attention to them, visit them, interact with them, try to explain to them that people who are sitting at home are not just goofing off. They really are working. And, you know, there are even some organizations that are approaching this financially. You know, people who continue to report to work have to drive, have to maybe buy their lunches, have to pay tolls, have to park. So give them some additional financial compensation to compensate for that. There's even been some discussion, I don't know anybody who's done this, about sort of taxing people who are working remotely because they don't have to pay for those things. But I think we need to, one of the slides was empathetic leadership, to empathize with people who are on the front lines, give them what they need, whether it's equipment, support, materials, training opportunities, development opportunities. Pay attention to these people and make sure they understand that we deeply appreciate all of the work that they're doing, and we know how important and stressful it is. I wish I had a magic answer to that, but I don't.
All right, another one here. Person working in the COVID response team, and she said they're losing staff and staff are very discouraged, and she's looking for tools to improve morale and asking the question of how can you engage employees when there's significant barriers to change policies that require approval from, like, say, let's say the board of supervisors.
Yeah.
What can someone do at a department level to keep employees engaged and improve that morale?
You know, that's a great question. And it goes to a question that sometimes I'm asked, which is, you know, I understand, Bob, that engagement is important, but I can't get leadership in this organization to focus on it. And my answer to that is, focusing on engagement is the right thing to do, but you got to make the business case. Why is it important? I think it's the same thing. If people are, if you're losing people, if you're having attendance problems, performance problems because of the stress, and clearly there is a tremendous amount of stress, you need to be able to make that argument to leaders who control the resources. I'm losing people. People are taking time off because they can't deal with the stress anymore. They're making mistakes. Make the argument that if we don't fix this, If we don't give them support tools, we don't hire additional people, we are going to be at a crisis, and it's going to be in your laps. Because at the end of the day, people are going to be looking to senior leadership, whether it's the council or the board, and they're going to want to know why you didn't fix this sooner. So we got to make the business case with data, whether it's turnover or performance or attendance. Not just it's the right thing to do, but there's a business case for why we need to focus on this.
And I got one more for you, and then we'll
Sure.
wrap it up here.
Sure.
Someone asked, like, what's the pros and cons of an employee engagement anonymous survey? Kind of why would you want to make it anonymous versus not?
A lot of organizations hire organizations like us to do the surveys because they want them to be confidential or anonymous. And there are two advantages to that. One is it typically drives a higher response rate. If employees know that a third party is going to get their responses and not their supervisor, not their manager, not their organization, they're going to be more likely to respond. And secondly, they're going to be more likely to respond candidly. And we guarantee when we do a survey, and we have never had a data breach, no one in the organization will see any individual employee's survey responses. The responses come back directly to us, not through the organization, not through the city, not through the county, not through the agency, directly back to us. We provide a bunch of reports, but the data are aggregated. We do not report at the individual employee level. And our reputation and our continued existence depends on us meeting that guarantee. We have never had a breach. So confidentiality can drive a higher response rate and also generate more candid responses. And the value in an engagement survey is we want a lot of employees to respond, and we want them to respond honestly.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Bob. It was a pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for attending. And be sure to check out our website for the recording as well as the slides. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.